This specific project, I'm going to be focusing on B11, which is the biological perspective. The learning outcome for this is discuss at least 2 ethical considerations at the biological level of analysis. When a researcher wants for the concept, I'm going to be going into the overall concept. When a researcher wants to conduct an experiment, there must be ethical considerations that they must consider, as well as their research must be approved by the APA, which is the American Psychological Association, which approves the research in order for it to first be conducted. There's certain ethics that are involved, such as protection of harm, consent, the right to withdraw, confidentiality, as well as no deception that was present in the study. The first is physical and mental harm, like protection from harm, which is protection and psychological harm. But in the biological perspective, there's more of the physical harm and the effects that it can leave on an individual or an animal. If there were effects on a human, for example, it can affect them in the long run, such as the physical activities would be certain activities that they won't be able to pursue, or if there was any psychological harm, it wouldn't allow them to be able to, for example, get a job or do certain activities that they did before. Another ethical consideration, within, going back to the harm, there's also certain age ranges that are more susceptible to harm, which are elderly people or infants. And since they're more susceptible, the researcher must look at the research specifically and avoid harm for them. The concept continued. There's also other considerations, such as informed consent, which occurs before the research is done, where the participant is told of the aim of the study, how long the study will last, and the procedures that will be taken. And in that case, the participant can either say they want to be a part of the study or they don't want to be a part of the study. Along with informed consent, there's a right to withdraw, which the participant can leave the study during whatever time that the study is being conducted, and the researcher can't tell them no, because that's against the ethical considerations. So if the participant feels like they don't want to take part in the study, or they feel like they don't want their data to be collected and then brought out, they can leave the study whenever they choose to. Also, there should be the confidentiality among the participants, which is their personal information must be kept private if they choose to, such as their age or their name or where they live. So these are all ethical considerations that must be taken into account, and the researcher must follow in order for the research to truly be seen as ethical research. Because if there's no protection from harm, if there's no confidentiality, and the participant didn't want any of that information to be brought out in the first place, then it can cause issues with the research and the credibility and validity of the research in itself. So we're going to go into the studies that go with this learning outcome. The first study is Berthold, and this study wanted to see the effects that the castration of roosters would have, with the castration of roosters and the hormone testosterone, and what the effects of that hormone would lead if that hormone was taken away. So in this study, it was roosters. There were 6 roosters, and in the first group, they had the roosters that had their testicles removed, and it was completely removed, and they didn't get them back on. The second group of roosters had their testicles removed, but they had another rooster's testicles reimplanted. And the third group had their testicles removed, but they had their own reimplanted into them. And the behaviors were recorded afterwards to see if there were any changes in the way that they behaved. And the findings were that the first group of roosters that had their testicles completely removed had major behavioral changes, such as they didn't crow a lot. They didn't want to mate so often, and that was unlike them. And in the second and third group, their behavior came back to normal, even if they had their testicles reimplanted or of another one. They still continued their regular activities, such as mating or fighting or crowing. The next study is Myers and Sperry, and in this study, it was conducted in 1953 in order to see what the purpose of the corpus callosum was in cats. And in this study there was two groups of cats, and the first group of the cats had their corpus callosum severed, and the second group did not, and it was the regular control in order to see the difference in between. And then the cats that had the cats went through such tasks in order to see what the effects were. One of the tasks was that they were blindfolded. Another one was that they had to touch the circle and square in order to receive a reward, which was food. And there was also the switching in the blindfold between each eye in order to see the effects. And the effects, like what was found from the study, was that the cats that had the first group of cats that had the corpus callosum that was severed, they had no remembrance of the specific task that was taken, so they could understand that there was broken in connections between the different hemispheres of the brain, and the cats being able to communicate their tasks very well. The third study that we will be talking about was Money and Earhart, which this study focused on a male, and this was a case study, and it focused on a male called David Raymer. And in the beginning, David Raymer, this study was conducted to see how like gender roles were determined by like the social expectations and everything. And David Raymer was a twin, and he was born a twin boy. But the issue that he had was that he accidentally had his penis. That was the main issue with the study. But this boy, the researcher that conducted this research in the beginning said that since he had his penis removed, that they should raise David as a girl, because since he didn't have his male parts, then there would be no reason for him to act like a male, since he didn't have that defining role. And so David went through castration as well as a hormone replacement to sort of give the hormones of a woman and for him to continue his life as a female. And then David Raymer's name was changed to Brenda. And from this, there were some unethical considerations that were taken, such as like deception and like harm. So this study was basically to show the unethical parts of research, such as changing someone's gender without their consent. And that was what the overall